well.
Guess so
And
too. It's my
is there any?
moment.
We're looking forward to it. Anything you might want to say before we get started, Amy, in terms of the day, or
Well,
um,
just I look forward to another day of richness, ideas, conversations, and stimulation and inspiration. And I am very pleased you're all here with us.
so thank you, Amy. Yes, it's really nice to be coming back together again for day two. And I also want to welcome colleagues who maybe weren't in yesterday and are here today. And we definitely recommend the recordings. They should be ready for us to watch at least by the end of this week coming. There's so much, Amy, isn't there, to go back to and enjoy.
It sure is.
So much good stuff. I want to make sure everybody's got the program as well, so everybody can see what's coming up today. So maybe the team can pop the link to the program back in the chat, if that's all right. And if you were here yesterday, I guess you were in the process of the parallel sessions as well. So it's really easy to just either stay here, that's the easiest thing to do because there will be workshops in this room, or to pop over to the other room where there'll be some wonderful things happening as well. So we're really looking forward to that. I want to say thank you to Wesley and Sebastian for looking after us all day yesterday.
Yes, and they did such a great job.
It was really good, particularly with the ceremonies last night, and just making everything go so smoothly. So thank you. And it's great to have you back again today on the tech. So thank you both for making sure everything is safe and smooth. And thank you for the contact details in the chat as well, Sebastian. So if anybody has any tech issues at all today, please let us know in the chat. We'll be right there to take care of you. And the email address is there too, so you can also pop us an email if you need anything, or over the next week to come, if there's anything you're not sure of, or you get stuck with the recordings, you can easily pop us an email and we'll take good care. I think that's really it, Emmy, isn't it? I think we're good to go and get ready to get started. And
I think you're right, John.
Oh, Wesley, thank you for the program there. Sorry, Emmy.
Yeah, fine.
Can I read your bio as a way of...
Go ahead.
Great, let's do that. And your slides are coming up there. Thank you. So a warm welcome back, everyone, to day two. And we're very pleased to be getting started on our first keynote of the day. Emmy, you're holding both conference chair and keynote presenter, so we really appreciate you holding all those roles. I'm going to read your bio by way of introduction.
Okay.
So Emmy van Dusen is a philosopher and psychologist who's worked as an existential therapist since 1973. She's an international speaker and has authored 20 books which have been widely translated. She founded several training organizations and academic institutions, as well as the Society for Existential Analysis and its journal. She was the driving force behind the First World Congress of Existential Therapy in 2015, which also led to the birth of the Federation for Existential Therapists in Europe. She's visiting professor with Middlesex University and president of the Worldwide Existential Movement. And Emmy, you're delivering the keynote titled Defying the Dying of the Light. Over to you, Emmy.
Right. Hello, everybody. So, defying the dying of the light can be understood in lots of different ways. I will interpret it in a way that fits best, I think, with the idea of the existential movement to bring wisdom to the world. Those are the books. That's the book coming out in March. That's the book on the way. But today I'm focusing on what happens when we go into the wild woods and we fear that we are losing the light. Now, this title of the conference was inspired by the book Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. And in chapter 3 of that book, Mole goes on a journey to find Badger, and it is a story of danger, fear, courage, and love in a very dark, wintry landscape. And it starts like this. It was a cold, still afternoon with a hard, steely sky overhead when he slipped out of the warm parlour into the open air. The country lay bare and entirely leafless around him, and he thought that he had never seen so far and so intimately into the insides of things as on that winter day when nature was deep in her annual slumber and seemed to have kicked the clothes off. It's all there already, that in the darkness sometimes we see things that are otherwise hidden. But things get worse on this journey because it starts to snow. And after a while, it says, they had lost all count of time. They pulled up dispirited, weary, and hopelessly at sea, and sat down on a fallen tree trunk to recover their breath and consider what was to be done. This is exactly what happens to each of us. Occasionally, we feel lost in the dark woods. We feel as if there is no way out. This is a theme in all folk tales. Evgenia will be speaking about Little Red Riding Hood, the Charles Perrault fairy tale of a child who is not up to the dangers in the wild wood and who gets taken in. I think this too is an experience that each of us as adults also have to come to terms with. Grimm's Hansel and Gretel is also about going into the wild woods and wrongly trusting and being abandoned by parents and breadcrumbing your way to safety and then discovering that the safety is also not safe and gives you false promises. Now, this story is embodied by Dante's Divine Comedy, which was written in 1307. Imagine that. He said, in the middle of the journey of my life, I found myself inside a dark forest. For the right way I had completely lost. I spoke about this in my book Paradox and Passion as a metaphor for life and how we sometimes need to do what Dante suggested, which was that our way out always leads through hell. He said there is no shortcut. That's an interesting idea. In Milton's Paradise Lost, published in 1667, there is the same exploration again. And this phrase is very interesting. It is described as no light, but rather darkness visible. And though we know that darkness is an absence of light, to many of us, that region of darkness and sorrow becomes visible to us. It becomes like an oppressive force in its own right, and we forget that it is a state of lack and a state of absence rather than a thing in its own right. For 20 years, I lived there, which is a place called the Dark Peak. I actually lived on a road called the Snake Pass. It was surrounded by moors and woods, and we lived in an old workhouse which had been turned into a psychiatric hospital and then into a cooperative housing community. And it was for me a refuge I won't tell the story, but it was a sanctuary for me. But at the same time, it exposed me to the wilds all around me. And this bridge over the River Rivelin was just 50 yards away from our house. And we used to walk over that into the wild woods. And there was always a little tension about what we would find on our journey and a sort of a relief. And in winter, like in the story, it would get quite scary sometimes. Fortunately, we had a wonderful St. Bernard dog called Bellamy who used to keep us company and keep us safe. And I learned so many things in those years. I learned about the importance of reliable companionship, where you feel mutual support. I also learned a lot about nature. I learned how survival in the wild woods, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and symbolically, is all about sheltering and collaboration, and how the trees work with each other and create these networks underground. And also how trees, look at this particular tree, how it was able to survive on a rock, actually shooting roots all around the rock and integrating it into its life. Not to mention, of course, trees losing branches all the time and repairing themselves. All those observations became metaphors for life for me. And I would argue that those trees were constantly defying the dying of the light. This poem by Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, is very poignant, I think. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. This is how life feels a lot of the time, that it is a long journey and there is a lot to do simply to survive, and to not be cowed by the feeling of the dying of the light is an art in itself. Of course, my title was mainly inspired by the beautiful poem of Dylan Thomas, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And it goes on. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words have forked no lightning, because their words have forked no lightning, do not go gentle into that good night, but rave rage against the dying of the light. Right, I think I have established that defying the dying of the light may be something we want to learn a little bit more about. The existential art of facing not just death, but the darkness inside of us is a very important thing all through philosophy. Socrates, as quoted by Plato in the Phaedo, talked about owing a rooster to Aesculapius, which meant, that was the god of health. And what he meant by that is, by him dying at the age of 73, being killed by the state, he was not going to have to live through old age and all the illnesses. So he was grateful for this early death. Any man whom you see resenting death was not a lover of wisdom, but a lover of the body, he said. And Horace said, in the capacious urn of death, every name is shaken. In other words, we all die. And Marcus Aurelius in his meditation said it is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live. And that is very true, is it not? That it is so tempting to stop yourself being fully alive. And we learn to diminish ourselves throughout our lifetime. And what we need to dare to do is to allow life to actually shine through us while we have that possibility and before it is too late. Simone de Beauvoir said every living moment is a sliding towards death. But if you're willing to look it in the face, you discover that every moment toward death is life. Every moment toward death is life. So it is very much about learning to keep going on that journey through the wild woods. And to realize that when it's dark, you have to be the source of the light. And when it is dark in society, we together have to become the source and the reminder of the light, instead of bemoaning the fact that the darkness has entered into the world. Erasmus says, "Give light and the darkness will disappear." Give light yourself. And this applies to each and every one of us. And it applies so the more when we see that people live in war zones or as refugees, and how hard that is. And we heard from our Ukrainian colleagues yesterday about that. So we need to be aware of how living with war and violence and societies that are unjust, what a toll that takes on all of us, and how we need to work towards overcoming that state of life in the world. Because people living in fear anywhere in the world, with death anxiety anywhere in the world, as these kids in Gaza, they still have to survive. They still have to cook, eat, sleep, live, play, learn, seek comfort. So imagine what toll it takes on your life to maintain your light in those conditions, and then remember how favorable your own conditions are and how you may use them to the best of your abilities. I learned this from very early on, growing up in the shadow of the Second World War, and I knew that I couldn't let myself be crushed by my fears and the darkness I felt around me and inside me, that I had to learn to shine my own light. And Paul Tillich is really a wonderful guide in this, because his talk about existential courage just sums that up so beautifully. So I always return to him. He is a light in the darkness for me. When he speaks about existential courage, he speaks about the universal self-affirmation of one's being in the presence of the threat of non-being. And he reminds us that this is hard to do for the average person, and that if you're vulnerable, or as he said, neurotic, you may be able to only take a tiny little bit on board, but it is possible to get stronger and to create an inner core that allows you more flexibility with that, so that you can become creative and that you can, over a lifetime, accumulate inner strength that allows you not just to withstand darkness, but to light the inner light no matter what happens around you. And this is what I believe courage is. It is to foster that inner light. Literally, courage means core, heart, ago, to act from the heart, to act from the core of yourself. Instead of letting yourself be distracted, you act from the deepest part inside of you, where you light your inner light. And if that connects with the light in the cosmos, which inevitably it does, because you and I and each of us are children of the universe. We're not just our own people. We are made from stuff in the universe, stardust, as people like to say, and we are obviously connected with all that is. I have become very interested in the recent growth of panpsychism. I've always loved Spinoza and his pantheism, but the new panpsychism, for instance, with Philip Goff's book, Why? The Purpose of the Universe, opens our eyes to lots of interesting things, such as the speed of light is constant. It's the one thing in the universe that is constant, no matter what. It is always about 300,000 kilometers per second. It's unimaginably fast. And the spectrum that is visible to the human eye is incredibly limited. So we're actually only seeing and hearing a tiny bit of what is really out here. We are used to radio waves and networks, but of course we don't see them, but it's all happening around you and you can sort of imagine it. Now start to imagine what else is really there all around us and out there in the universe, invisible to the human eye. Here is your spectrum. At the micro level, we know that electrons and light behave in weird ways, and we really don't know the half of it. I think it is hubris to believe that our scientific endeavors has brought us the whole truth. It's a fragment of the truth, and it is very important to remain open-minded. What has happened to human beings is that we have removed our connectivity to nature and to the cosmos and have become delusionary in the sense of our own importance and our own majesty in the world. We have lost our connection to everything that is invisible, and we have also, because of that, I think, lost our connection with each other, with the creatures on this earth, and with ourselves. We are disconnected and disenchanted. And I am very grateful for the internet, which is one way in which we are becoming reconnected in ways that were not possible previously. So there are lots of things we're ignorant about the whole time, but we also do things wrong. Robin Wall Kimmerer, in her Braiding Sweetgrass, talked about the Native American point of view a lot, and it is very refreshing. She said, if all the world is a commodity, how poor we grow. When all the world is a gift in motion, how wealthy we become. And she talks about learning to pay attention again, and particularly to become more aware of the importance of reciprocity in the living world and between human beings. And when you open your eyes, you will open your heart as well. She said the Native American elders teach these things to the young: wisdom, respect, love, honesty, humility, bravery, and truth toward each other, toward themselves, and towards the whole of creation. Now, I can't think of a much better, simple rule for how we should all live with each other in this world. But of course, our understanding of psychotherapy and existential philosophy has taught us further skills that we can use in doing so. They have taught us that when we focus on our experience and our feelings, we can figure out what the meaning of those are instead of enacting them. We can understand how to deal with threats or with hopes or possibilities, and we have learned to figure out what the facts behind events are and to do our research about it. And we have also learned that through contemplation about everything that we accumulate about that, we can gain understanding. And that always involves an understanding about both the limitations of our situation and the possibilities of our situation. It has also taught us that we are capable of transformation and of the dialectic that helps us to shift a level and to move from one thing to another, and to not be lost by too much freedom, as Kafka warned, and not to be fallen in with the forced choices we are often pushed to make in a consumerist society, but to become aware and to go around the world with this new kind of awareness and reciprocity, which leads to a different kind of freedom, which is much more deeply felt and more complex and complete, creative, caring, and considerate. And both these things are true. Sometimes when you're in a dark place and it seems that the light has gone, you have been planted in the earth. And with time, you will grow back into the light automatically. But it is also true that we need to not just be patient, but active in that process and nurture ourselves and keep safe and do the right things for growth to become possible. And when Buddha said that if we could just take time to focus on seeing the miracle of even just a single flower, or quite frankly, just a single petal of a single flower, our whole life would change. So there is something there about keeping in mind both the detail of what is the smallest thing to focus on and see the miracle, and remember the bigger context of how the process of life unfolds. And to remember that things take time, that pebbles in the sea get worn down slowly, but eventually have their edges smoothed by rubbing against each other. I think life does that to all of us human beings. That diamonds are created by mishaps and catastrophes, which create that pressure on them to create that incredible shiny beauty. That pearls are created in oysters because a foreign object has entered them, and they surround them and tend to it and grow it into something beautiful. And also to remember that we need courage to allow life to do that work over time for us. And that a ship in harbor is safe, my friend. but it is not what ships are built for. It is something I have to keep reminding myself of all the time. But also to remember that human beings, by becoming so materialistic and so competitive, have forgotten so many things: how to be attentive, how to be patient, how to be brave, how to be kind, how to be loving. And this is a lovely reminder. You know, this guy fell in this hole, and the orangutan, instead of threatening him, extended a helping hand. We need to start seeing how we can dedicate ourselves to this more loving, committed way of life. And that is about leaving a little piece of yourself in everything you do. And you will find that the more you give of yourself, and the more grows inside of yourself. It's not about building utopia. It is about learning to let life flow through you again, and to rediscover that you are a source for life, a channel for life, a tunnel for life, if you like, and that you can radiate it instead of being burned by it, and that in dark times we can do this with each other and for each other. We can explore our limits and our possibility, and we can learn to live more deliberately, and to befriend and treasure our anxiety, which tells us we are alive and we have that energy, and we can face new facts and seek truth and find purpose and find direction. And we can breathe and live to the full, and we can live from our core and with action, with courage. We can live with passion and compassion. We can change things. We can transform ourselves. We can use conflicts for transformative energy through dialogue and communication. Remember that in the Garden of Eden, that first wild wood, it was filled with fruit, but there was no distinction between dark and light and good and bad. And coming out of the Garden of Eden, it is said, we learned to have to deal with dark and light and good and bad. And this is a task we often forget. We think it is about having all the light and none of the dark, having all the good stuff and none of the bad, when in fact it is about the dance of both. Let your life dance lightly on the edges of time, like dew on the tip of a leaf. Let's remember the things we have forgotten and how our minds are connected together. Let's stand in awe of all the things that are beyond us and greater than us, and rediscover that sense of a rapture when we find the light back inside of us and around us. Let's come to a place where we can conquer the limitations of the selfhood that we have created in order to survive in the world. We need it, and we need to be kind to ourselves about it. But we also need to let go of it and learn to be light bearers, light bringers, and guardians of the light, taking our transformative powers seriously, and be on this journey alone or together, daring to venture into those wild woods and rediscovering Heidegger's clearing, which is always a moment of wonder, isn't it? when suddenly you create space in your life again and you take time again to see, to feel, to know, to recognize, to remember what was forgotten, and to find elucidation and luminosity. It is a wonderful experience. And as soon as you get tuned into that way of living, everything changes, because you begin to see the network of meanings that carries you. Not stuff that you have to do on your own, but the network that carries you, the meanings that hold you. And you realize it is not all about hard work and persistence and courage. There can be great wisdom in a bit of hibernation. I did a lot of that when I lived in the Peak District. Finding sanctuary is so important. We all need safety to sleep. Otherwise, stress takes over. This is a book I strongly recommend because I think sleeping is highly underestimated. You do need 8 hours of sleep, friends. You need to get enough deep sleep and enough REM sleep to repair, process, and create these new connections in your brain. You need to empty your short-term memories into long-term memory. If you don't sleep, you don't learn. Sleeping after a day of active learning and courage, sleeping allows you to grow wisdom and to find the light inside of you. This brain is doing so much stuff for you the whole time. It is just bloody amazing. And don't let anyone summarize your whole life by telling you it is about this or that or that. It's about the whole damn thing and how it all works together, and it is incredibly complex. The point is that you have been given an amazing body and an amazing brain to learn, to adapt, to evolve, to make all these new connections, to face new realities, to be adaptable, to be flexible. And your brain will follow. It's always tuning and pruning, and it is always changing. And as we get older, it is wonderfully simplifying itself by losing unnecessary bits. That's how I choose to look at the aging of my brain. It is releasing some of the extra burdens and making my view of the world simpler. I think that's a great relief. So when you have slept properly, then, friends, it's time to wake up your brain. This is another book I strongly recommend by Lisa Miller, The Awakened Brain. She did some fantastic research that we should all know about. It is that the highly spiritual or spirited or inspired brains are much healthier and more robust, whereas brains of people who are depressed become weaker and more withered and more switched off. The more you allow yourself to connect, and the more your brain will activate, and the more life you will gather inside of you. To bring awe into your life, to bring transcendence into your life, to tune into synchronicity, and to re-enchant your life is what will bring that thing back to life. She found that if you have an awakened brain, you're 35 to 75% less likely to be depressed. You're also 40 to 80% less likely to become substance dependent. Now, tell me, should we enliven our brain through substances that we become dependent on? or through life itself and our own ability for enchantment and connectivity. It's for you to think about. Life is always rekindled when you put yourself back into the flow of it and you are willing to take on new challenges and to rekindle that light, to realign with truth, and to remember that truth never just lies in the middle of the path. It isn't like you sometimes people seem to think, you know, a bit of this and a bit of that and truth is somewhere in the middle. Oh no, it's not that easy. Truth is well hidden most of the time, and it is underground or somewhere out there, or it is a combination of many different aspects of things we are figuring out. Sometimes truth seems to beckon just around the corner, but it remains mysterious. No human being knows what the truth is, if there is a truth. Maybe truth is more of a process. It is a process of uncovering mysteries and figuring out more and more stuff. It is very much about unveiling more and more and processing things. And nobody lays out a reliable path for us. We have to find our own way. And sometimes it is cold and rough out there, but in mutuality we can do it. Never forget that you can rise from your ashes when everything has gone wrong, and that you can reaffirm the light that is in your eyes as long as you are alive. When we die, the light no longer shines from those eyes. But remember, it never goes. The light doesn't die. The light simply dies in one pair of eyes. But the light carries on. The sun keeps shining. The cosmos carries on. So live as if each day is your last. But remember that you are not the light. You channel it. Your life expectancy is now longer than it's ever been in human history. So make the most of the years you've got. And when life seems dystopic, do not despair, but create some kind of order, some cosmos in the chaos, and do what you can to face up to the problems instead of turning your back on them. Face the anxiety, as Yalom said, face your death anxiety and tell your story. Tell your own story, not just in your therapy, but constantly to each other. Tell yourselves to each other. And as Ricoeur said, storytelling is an experiencing that helps us to make a different sense of the world in narrative time rather than just in calendar time or subjective time. And doing that in a third person can help a lot. But we know that dialogue is what brings it out. And dialogue should be a holy thing in the world. We should have far more of it so that people come to see that the selves we create, the couples we create, the societies we create are not things. They are merely a matrix for the meanings and values we create and allow to manifest. And they unfold slowly through our actions and our sharing of words. So we know what the aim of an existential dialogue is. We know that we need to be serious about our projects. Simone de Beauvoir said, to will oneself moral and to will oneself free are one and the same decision. Heidegger said, potentiality is always more than actuality. There is always more possible for you. So realize the potential. I think I have made it very clear that my main message today is the importance of keeping your little flame burning so you can see it and you can pass it on. This is my best quote of today by James Baldwin. The longer I live, the more deeply I learn that love, whether we call it friendship or family or romance, I would say, or camaraderie or all kinds of other things, is the work of mirroring and magnifying each other's light. If we had that as our task, the world would be in a very different place. We would discover that we can rise from each night with a sense of hope. And Mary Oliver will have the last word. All night I heard the small kingdoms breathing around me, the insects and the birds who do their work in darkness. All night I rose and fell, as if in water, grappling with a luminous doom. By morning, I had vanished at least 12 times into something better. May you evolve into something better each night. May you find the light no matter how hard things are, and live another day no matter how despairing you get. Thank you so much for being here today and for us to think together about better ways of being in the dark and relighting that flame of light. Keep passing it on. May there be peace and freedom in your life and sanctuary when you defy the darkness. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Emmy. Let's open up the microphones for a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Emmy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Just taking care of the microphones, and Emmy, that's just popped you back on mute, so you might want to unmute for a moment. But
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for such an inspirational and deeply moving keynote, Emily.
Thank you.
so much
Thank you,
for that.
John. Thank you, John. I thought I'd make it more inspirational than factual this time.
Well, I can see the chat room. There's so much in there. I think you absolutely achieved that, Emmy. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.